Today, we're diving into a very specific data-driven forecast. It's all about our global energy and financial markets, and it points to a pretty critical window of time coming up in 2026.
So let's just get right to it. Here is the core prediction. A major structural disruption is forecast for the spring of 2026. And this isn't some vague warning. It's a very precise forecast that targets that crucial intersection of global energy and finance.
And it gets even more specific than that. The window for this potential event opens up on April 1st, 2026, and it closes on May 15th. But what's really crucial here is that the model identifies a peak probability window, that 10-day period between April 7th and April 16th.
So you're probably wondering, how on earth can anyone make a prediction that's this precise? Well, let's unpack the what, the where, and the why behind this forecast, starting with the complex systems that are actually being analyzed.
See, this isn't about looking at oil or stocks in a vacuum. The analysis focuses on a deeply interconnected system. Everything from the price of crude oil and that critical shipping lane, the Strait of Hormuz, all the way to how inflation snakes its way through our economies and hits the financial markets. Think of them all as gears in one giant, complex machine. Okay, so that brings us to the how. This forecast isn't just a guess. It comes from a model that has identified a specific, repeatable pattern of behavior, and it breaks it down into three really distinct phases. At its heart, the model is looking at a universal cycle of change that goes a little something like this. First, you've got a base phase, where everything is stable, it's predictable. Then comes the pressure phase, where you can feel the tension and stress starting to build up. And finally, you get an integration phase. That's when the system lets go of all that pressure and reorganizes itself. And that release is often sudden and very disruptive.
Now, this analytical framework actually has a name. It's called Triune Harmonic Dynamics, or THD for short. It was developed by a researcher named Kevin L. Brown, and he created it to model how all kinds of complex systems, from financial markets to physics, evolved through these repeating, predictable cycles.
And this isn't just some abstract idea. THD is actually built on a solid mathematical foundation. This formula you see here describes that repeating 3-6-9 pattern of change. It basically suggests that change isn't random chaos, but instead follows a predictable, almost musical rhythm.
Okay, so that's the theory. But does it hold up in the real world? The next logical step is to look back and see if we can spot this same three-phase pattern in some of the major global crises from the past.
And this is where it gets really interesting. This chart shows that pattern in action. Take a look at the 1973 oil crisis. You had a bottleneck from the OPEC embargo, which led to pressure from runaway inflation, and it was all released in a major recession. Or how about the 2008 financial crisis? A bottleneck in mortgages created a liquidity drain, which was released as a massive market crash. You see it time and time again. Bottleneck, pressure, release.
So if this pattern has been such a reliable map for past events, what does it tell us about where we are right now? Let's apply that same framework to today's global energy and financial systems.
According to the THD model, our current system is firmly, and I mean firmly, in what's called an advanced pressure phase. What that means is the tension is very high, stress is building up across the board, and the likelihood of one of those release events is growing by the day.
And this isn't just a feeling. We can actually put a number on it. The model uses what it calls a structural pressure index, which right now scores our system at a 32 out of a possible 40. And as you can see here, that puts us deep into the red zone, which indicates a high probability of a rupture.
Now, a key indicator when you're in this phase is a phenomenon called signal divergence. This is what happens when the official signals, what you hear from leaders, what you read in the headlines, are all projecting stability and optimism. But at the same time, the underlying structural indicators, the hard data, are flashing warning signs like rising energy prices, inflation, and geopolitical tension. This gap between the talk and the data is a classic sign that a major shift could be right around the corner.
So this brings us to what is arguably the most important point of all. A forecast is only useful if it's actually testable. We need to know how we can tell if this analysis is right or if it's wrong. The framework provides very clear criteria for that.
The model doesn't just vaguely predict disruption. It defines exactly what a structural release might look like. It could be something like a forced de-escalation of a major conflict or a sharp correction in the stock market. It could even be something as specific as a shutdown of shipping insurance for the Persian Gulf or governments having to implement emergency policies. Any of these would count.
And this is the part that makes it a truly scientific forecast.
it can be proven wrong. The model is totally upfront about it. It states that if that window between April 1st and May 15, 2026 passes without one of these major structural disruptions, then this specific use of the THD model should be considered falsified. It's a clear, measurable test, putting its own credibility on the line.
So we're left with this pretty powerful question. The Triune Harmonic Dynamics model suggests that history moves in this distinct rhythm of stability, then pressure, then release. So if the patterns of the past really are a map to the future, what exactly is today's mounting pressure telling us we should prepare for?